The reason that you know what's relevant is because some things don't change over time, and you've been evolving through 3.5 billion years. So you've built yourself, if we go back to that other diagram, you imagine the levels there, from the microactivities to the abstractions. You think about how much building had to go in before you could undertake those micro actions. So like here, you could move your hand. Well, that's great. How do you get the hand? Well, you know, it took a long time. It took almost all of the 3.5 billion years before you managed to come up with a hand. So even underneath the micro actions, there's this massive evolutionary history that's been built up partly as a consequence of some of the unchanging features of the environment, or at least in consequence of some of the slower changing features of the environment, that has given you this incredibly complex body that's really good at doing some things and not very good at doing other things at all. And so that's how you solve the relevance problem. And I actually think it's one of the most powerful arguments for the necessity of evolutionary theory. It's like, this problem is so complex because it's not only do you have to adapt to the environment across time, so you have to build a body that adapts to the environment. It's worse than that. It's like the train passing through the box. The environment's not stable. It keeps shifting and turning and moving and twisting. And so not only do you have to adapt to the environment, you have to adapt flexibly to the environment while it transforms itself at different levels of what would you say? At different levels of totality. Because sometimes there's minor changes in the environment. Sometimes, you know, a meteor hits the Earth and, you know, we're plunged into darkness for 4 years, or there's an ice age or something like that. So the levels of transformation in the environment can be radical. And the evolutionary process has to keep up with that. And the way it works, apparently, like I don't believe this is the whole story, although it's more or less the whole Darwinian story, is that something more or less works and then makes 1 million copies of itself. And there's tiny variations in those copies, often, at least in principle, because of copying error, which is where I think the theory's weak. And then they all die except like 2. And so why didn't those die? And the answer is, well, they happened by chance to vary in the direction that the environment varied, and so they get to continue. And so the reason evolution works is because everything dies. Everything fails. So, because you think, well, keeping up with a randomly changing environment is impossible. Well, so how do you do it? Well, you do 1 million things. Most of them don't work. But you only have to succeed enough to propagate yourself once.